On today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Flip and Steele, we hit number 3 on our countdown of the top fantasy centermen 22 years or under. We're hammering Wednesday's DFS targets and big-time bets, baby.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Hump Day, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite daily podcast. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Flip and Steele. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Hockey Network. We are proud to be across all platforms that you find your favorite content. I say it every single day, and I mean it every single day. Do not miss a single new episode. Hit us up on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Do not miss out on a single one of Steele's DFS selections, a single one of my big-time bets, or any of our hot analysis. You will not be mistaken by following us. Steele, I'm mumbling my words. I'm excited as always for Wednesday's board. Let's get into it, brother. We're hitting the top 5 fantasy centerman list. Again, 22 years or under. There's some polarizing choices being thrown around by me, but that's okay. That's why we have you here to hold us down, brother. Thank you for being with us. Let's get right into it. How you doing today? Who you feeling? Who we looking at? Let's get dirty.
Well, I'm doing great. And, if you weren't tuned in for yesterday's podcast, I was a little bit shocked with Flip's number 4 centerman on this list, with Nick Suzuki being that player, because I have him as my 3rd best centerman at 22 years of age and under. So for me, that's who I'm going with, Nick Suzuki of the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, the Montreal Canadiens have been a lot better recently. They're on a 3-game win streak. We'll dive into a little bit of that in the DFS portion of this podcast. But for now, I think Nick Suzuki is one of the most underrated players of his age group, as well as just an NHL player in whole. For me, he's got 30 points in 51 games so far this season. You touched on it a little bit in yesterday's podcast, where how great he's been for the Montreal Canadiens in the postseason, especially in that big, that deep run, making it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals last season against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But for me, he has an overall great game, a great two-way player, excellent two-way player for that matter. He's been compared to a guy like Patrice Bergeron, and at first I thought it was a little bit far-fetched, but just looking at the way he's played a lot this season, even though the Montreal Canadiens have struggled, he does resemble a lot to Patrice Bergeron. I think with the next couple of years, if the Canadiens were able to get a little bit better than they have played this season, he can be that type of player. Bergeron, he's got a career over 55 percentage in the faceoff wins, 4 Selkies for him, and that's the type of player Nick Suzuki is turning out to be for the Canadiens. Suzuki, 48.8% in the faceoffs. Just he's top 25 in the league this season. So for me, just being able to watch out, or being able to watch how well his game is rounded out over the course of 3 seasons so far, I think he's a tremendous centerman, and just every single year he continues to get better and better.
Yeah, you make a couple of interesting points there, Steele, and I love how deep you're getting down the face-off statistic rabbit hole. You seem to be bringing these up, and it's interesting points when we're talking about centermen, right? It's a face-off. This is a part of the game that, sure, it's not going to show up on the fantasy stat straight up, but a guy who wins face-off means his team has possession, means he's producing points. So these are angles that, you dig into the trenches like Steele and I do, and make sure you're doing your research, because I think that stat, Steele, is a very indicative one of his overall skill already at his age. You talked about Jack Hughes yesterday. I'm going to talk about him today and his lack of face-off talent. But it just goes to show you for Suzuki already at his age how advanced his game is. And that postseason angle cannot be denied. The kid can produce in the clutch. He produces when it counts already in his career, I think is a really great indication of where he's headed overall, Steele. And I respect that you have him higher on your list than I did. This is why we do different lists. And I think everything you're saying is line up for Nick Suzuki to be a guy that, if he's not already on your fantasy radar, he should be on it every single year, year in and year out.
Yeah, he's owned at 85% right now at ESPN. I believe 65 or 70% on Yahoo Fantasy League. So a
Mhm.
little bit lower than I actually expected, even though, like, I say this all the time when we talk about players on bad teams. Like, yes, the Montreal Canadiens are one of the worst teams in the NHL right now. But again, you can still find some hidden gems and some talent across all of these bad teams in the bottom five of the league. So for
Yeah.
me, Nick Suzuki, I expect his stock in fantasy leagues to go exponentially up in the next couple of years with the way he's projecting his game is going right now. Because like every time I watch him on the ice, he's doing the little things right. He's playing the right way every single time he's on the ice. He's always in the right areas, helping his team out as best as he can. And I think that the face-off stat right there kind of just excels him a little bit more on where he's trending to go with his throughout his career.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And, I have Jack Hughes at my number 3 spot. So, to switch gears a little bit, but to still talk about faceoffs, you mentioned it yesterday with Hughes. Suzuki already ahead of the curve in terms of faceoff winning percentage. And that's something that you can't be denied. But I will say this, my number 3 selection is Jack Hughes. Centerman, 22 years younger. He is only 20 years old. He is a first overall draft pick. And I'll say this, the kid has dealt with injuries and illnesses, and whilst also playing alongside a bunch of players who have 3 years or less experience, there's no one to really take him under their wing. Like, he's playing on the top line right now with, is it Sharanovich and Mercer. So those are 2 guys with not a ton of NHL experience, and you could almost see in his game that he needed that kind of tutelage because he's really coming on strong now. And realistically, Steele, you made the point, what I think is the main issue with Hughes, because this kid's skating ability is almost unrivaled. He's being compared to the skating ability of McDavid. No one gets compared to McDavid. The comparisons might not be for real, and there's a lot of book out on this kid. But if he can start to put on some pounds in the weight room in the offseason, and I think those are the things you really learn from veteran players, right? You learn the routine, you learn the grind from those veteran guys and the importance of taking care of your body. And he hasn't had that yet. So give him some time on the off ice, give him some time on the body. If this kid puts on 10 or 15 pounds of muscle, he's no doubt in the number 1 spot. He has the highest potential ceiling of anyone on this list, in my opinion, and the skating factor cannot be ignored, in my opinion. 20 years old, lots of upside, and I'll say this to finish my point on Jack Hughes. NHL GMs know a lot more about hockey than I do. They know a lot more about player development than I do, obviously. They don't miss on first overall picks very much. So let's not, fully sell out on Jack Hughes just yet. 30 points in 30 games. He's already proven at 20 years old that he can be a point per game producer. Keep an eye on this kid. He will continue to get better. And if he can add 10 to 15 pounds, Steele, the Eastern Conference better look out.
I don't think he does have the highest ceiling on this list. That's why I could only leave him on the 4 at number 4 for this top 5 centerman list.
And that's fair.
He is a great centerman. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. He needs to work on his face-off draws. He's under 30%. It's not good enough for the New Jersey Devils. And we talked about it yesterday. If he puts on 15 pounds, 20 pounds, a little bit of muscle, it's going to help him not get injured as much. And he's got to take better care of his body as well. So everything you just said, I like everything you just said about being able to take care of his body a little bit better. He hasn't had that person to kind of, put him under the wing and, help him with that veteran presence. So that's the only reason why I couldn't put him any higher, because we've seen it over the first 3 years. He just gets injured too much and he's too little right now. Nick Suzuki, he isn't a big guy, but he plays a big game. And that's why I think Suzuki's a little bit better than Jack Hughes at this stage in his career.
And that's totally fair. And that's why we're telling you to keep an eye on these guys, because either way you slice it, their stocks will continue to rise as centermen 22 years or under. Make sure you keep it locked for the next 2 episodes this week. We'll reveal our second and first centerman 22 years or under. Keep it locked right here. We're talking about these guys and taking care of their bodies, but make sure you take care of your bodies. And one of the best ways to do that, and I think Steele knows what I'm talking about, is you've got to hit up Built Bars. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're good for you. Compare that to the old, Dutty candy bar. It's no good. Built Bars, low calorie, high protein. Replace those candy bars with Built Bars. Come on now. Go to Built.com, scroll down the macros chart, You know what's going to happen. You'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber. I'm going to go on. Mint brownie, coconut almond. These flavors are all fire. We know Steele loves the new one of the month, white chocolate cookies and cream. He's got the wrapper sprinkled around the bed at night. That's how delicious they are. But there's new flavors coming out all the time. If they can think of a flavor, it will be good. They make it delicious first and make it good for you after. At Built.com, they are all about the taste. So make sure you head over to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off. I'll say it once more. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and get 15% off. Thank you so much, guys, for making us your first listen every single day. We really, really appreciate the love. So what we're going to do for y'all, we're going to show you some love, feed you a couple of good DFS targets for Wednesday's 5-game betting board. I think it's a 5-game board.
Yep.
Yeah, let's go with that, Steele. My brother, DFS, I'm going to turn it over to you. I have a couple of angles that I'm looking at, but I'm going to let you take the lead today heavy. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I've got 2 angles here as well, which I usually do. And I think the games for Wednesday night are a little bit interesting. I went with 2 matchups that I think are some pretty juicy games that I'm looking really forward to watching. First one is, of course, the Colorado Avalanche versus the Detroit Red Wings. That's the first go-to for me. I am hitting hard with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. Those guys obviously are going to be premium prices, over $8,500 because of how talented those guys are. But look, the Colorado Avalanche got smoked 5-1 against the Boston Bruins over the weekend, or on Monday, excuse me. And I don't think that's going to happen back-to-back games. They're not going to lose back-to-back. They haven't lost back-to-back, I think, probably 2 months since back in November it was. From November, actually, I'm pretty sure they were 30-3. Like they just don't lose games very often.
I'll back you up on this one, Steele, because you're spot on, and don't give away too much for the next segment, but you are spot on, sir. They have not lost more than 1 game in a row since the very start of the season. And in fact, they almost always follow up a loss with a big win by 2 or more goals. So continue, sir, because you're going right down the right path.
That's perfect. And just to add on to Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, I would like to go with Cale Makar, but that's a little bit splurging too much money in one basket right there. So I'm going to go with Devin Taves of the Colorado Avalanche on the blue line. I think he won't be as expensive as Cale Makar, but again, he brings a lot of the same value. He has been playing probably his best year with the Colorado Avalanche this season with them since coming back from the injury. So for me, Devin Taves is also a guy to look out for. I would put him in my lineup as well if I had enough, if I had the money, and of course I do. So I'm going with Devin Taves, Nathan MacKinnon, and Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, we do this almost every single week. I'm going to be looking at this game a lot from my betting segment in a couple of minutes here. But everything you're saying checks out. I'm actually looking at another game as well. I would actually, if you're going to play with someone on the blue line, you have to go with Makar. But like you said, you're going to be burning through most of your budget on the top guys of Colorado. But I also really like this spot for Makar. I'll get to that in a second. Where I'm also looking, and I could see this game being a very high-scoring one, again, I'll get to that in a second, is this Montreal-Buffalo game. I think it could be a long night for the man running the goal horn in Montreal on both ends of the rink. So I would I'm not going to talk about the Buffalo Sabres guys. We've talked about those guys almost at length. You know that there's some value there on a team that's clicking offensively a little bit. Sure, they're still taking L's every other game because they don't have a goalie, but we've talked about them. Take a look at the Montreal Canadiens down the lineup a little bit for some serious value on a team who is starting to turn the page a little bit. Let's not get it twisted. They're still in dead last for a reason. But there's some value here, Steele, especially with a guy like, look, really down the list at a guy like Rem Pitlick, who is now playing, I don't know why, but he's got points in like 3 or 4 straight games. Even the second line with Gallagher and Hoffman. Cole Caulfield is hot again. So there's some options on the Montreal Canadiens. I like this spot for them as well. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. So I see some value on the Montreal Canadiens. Look down the lineup a little bit, Steele, especially if you've blown your budget on those top guys on the Avalanche. You need to fill out the lineup a bit. I would look to the Montreal Canadiens, although I do like what Steele is up to here, as always.
I love where our heads are at right now because that's exactly
Boom.
the same matchup I had
Boom.
going as well. Buffalo beat the Montreal Canadiens 5-3 a week and a half ago, like you
Right.
said. So this is probably going to be a high-scoring game. I was going
I
to say
hope
the
so.
exact same things. Cole Caulfield, he has 8 points in 6 games. I was going to mention the Buffalo Sabres players on their team, but like you said, we've talked about them so many times. There's a lot of great depth and value picks for cheap options as well. I was going to throw out Jeff Skinner's name because he's having a pretty good season for the Sabres as well, but you hit it right on the nose. Rem Pitlick, Mike Hoffman, Brendan Gallagher, those guys are going to be cheap. They've been playing really well under Martin St. Louis. So I love everything you just said about the Montreal Canadiens Buffalo Sabres matchup. Where you can go make those bets is BetOnline. Football might be over this season, but basketball and hockey are in full steam for both pro and college hoops and puck. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. BetOnline, where the game starts. This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now almost impossible for local chain auto parts stores to have what you need in stock. There's so many intimidating and often pointless questions, and for me, I get confused and it just doesn't make any sense to me. You have the devices with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time, save your money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a car dealership or a chain store? Example, you can buy a Honda Odyssey fuel pump from Rock Auto for $215. If you go to a local chain store, it's $350. So you're saving a lot of money and you're saving time because you can order from home. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you there. They have amazing selections, reliable low prices, all the parts for your car that your car will ever need from rockauto.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. So please make sure you subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Flip and I appreciate all the support you guys give us out there. So thank you so much for that. With that being said, Flip, it's time for the big time bets where the money's made. We love making money over here for ourselves and for you guys out there watching Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. So first, Flip, you said you wanted to dive into your bets first. I'm always interested to hear what you pull out because you have some intriguing bets that I usually sprinkle some money on as well. So shoot me with your first one right here.
I appreciate that, brother. And I just want to, I went to the old Vancouver Canuck trifecta well the other night. That banged out. Check, check, check. So let's keep that rolling. I'm not going to do the same thing tonight because I don't want to jinx it, but I'll hit you with one right off the top because we just talked about it. Everything's pointing in the direction of a high-scoring game for this Buffalo Sabres Montreal Canadiens game. When I was looking at this earlier today, it was at 5.5. It's already jumped up to 6. I could see this going up to 6.5. So make sure you jump on this over in the Montreal-Buffalo game, over 6. The total has, let me hit you with a couple of numbers real quick, and then I'll flip it back over to you, Steele, because I don't think people need to hear too much about this one to buy into the over angle here. But here I go. The total has gone over the number in 11 of Montreal's last 15 games overall, including 4 of the last 6 against Buffalo at home have gone over the number. You mentioned the most recent meeting between these two about a week and a half ago. There was 8 goals produced there. So that recent track record, everything's screaming over. Not to mention, can we talk about neither of these teams have a semblance of any goalie? There's a second or third stringer in there every single night for real. That does not make me feel confident about any kind of under. I mentioned the guy running the goal horn having a long night. I could see that happening here. Both teams are also starting to click offensively. Let's throw that out there. Buffalo looks good up front, even against Colorado the other day, putting up 3 or 4. I like this angle for a big-time scoring game. I could see a 4-3. I could see a 5-3. I mentioned the goaltending situations. This game screams and over. Let's hammer it. My first pick of the night, Buffalo Sabres at Montreal Canadiens, over 6 at this point. I could see it going higher, but jump on it early and get that number at 6.
All right, I like that too. I like the over because of the trend that we've seen over the last couple of weeks with the Montreal Canadiens and Sabres. I'm going to play it a little bit safer because we are still talking about some of the worst teams in the league, so a win could go either way. I will go with the Montreal Canadiens on the money line at -110 just because they have won 3 in a row. The Sabres have lost 3 in a row, so I'm going to go with the team trending in the right direction with the Canadiens on the money line.
Okay.
And then my lock of the night is going to be the Colorado Avalanche puck line versus the Detroit Red Wings. You said it yourselves. After a big loss, they usually bounce back with a big win with more than 2 goals in that game. Nedeljkovic has not been great for the Detroit Red Wings, since the start of 2022. So for me, I'm going to go with the Colorado Avalanche on the puck line. That will be my lock of the night.
You know what, my friend? You are the puck line king. I know your puck line track record. It took a little bit of a hit the other night, but for the most part, you're banging out. So that's, props due. I'm gassing you up every time, but that's okay. We're going to keep that going. I also have the Colorado Avalanche on the puck line -1.5 at, what did you have it at? Minus what? I saw it at
-1.5. Yes.
-120 on the odd. Sorry for the odd. Yeah, so I'm doing the same exact thing. I mentioned the track record of the Colorado Avalanche coming off of bad losses. So let me reiterate that. Aside from a 3-game losing skid to open the season, the Colorado Avalanche have not lost consecutive games at all season long. As in, expect a big bounce back after they got dominated by the Boston Bruins the other night. They got shelled for, I think, 40-plus shots. They are the real deal, and I expect them off of arguably their worst loss of the season to come back in a very, very big way. And aside from that blip, Colorado is a great road team at 15-7-2. They have won 7 straight against Detroit overall, and 6 of their last 7 visits to Little Caesars Arena. Shout out to the garlic dipping sauce. But I like the Colorado Avalanche here on the puck line, -1.5 at -120. But my lock of the night comes from the same game, good sir. You talked about him before. I didn't want to get too heated because I wasn't really loving what you were saying. But I'm taking Cale Makar. Anytime assist. I've talked about this. He is the straw that stirs the drink there on the power play. He's a catalyst. I love that whole team, but don't get me wrong. Makar is the point man on the power play and a facilitator anytime he's on the ice. Oh, wait a second. He has assists in 5 straight games. At least 1. 2 games there, he had 2 or more. So let's take this in. 33 assists from Makar on the season. I'm not going to go into this anymore. I like Colorado a lot in this spot, so I'm going to go with their best defenseman to be distributing, to be making these plays. Give me Cale Makar anytime assist for big flips. Lock of the night.
I like that too. And I said leave Cale Makar out of DFS just because if you were to go with Nathan budget-wise, you're pretty much spending 50% of your budget just on those 3 players. But of course you can go with them because they're all-stars. So I like that pick right there with the Cale Makar anytime assist. My last pick of the night is going to be the Dallas Stars on the money line against the Winnipeg Jets, -150 as of right now, but I can see it going a little bit lower. I talk about the Dallas Stars a lot just because of how well that top line with Pavelski, Hintz, and Robertson has produced for them and really won them a bunch of the games they've won so far this season. So that will be my last pick of the night. My lock is still the Colorado Avalanche puck line against the Detroit Red Wings. Your lock of the night, I believe, was the Buffalo Sabres Montreal Canadiens game over 6 right now.
It is actually Cale Makar anytime assist. Okay. I'm going to that same game for your lock. That's okay, brother. No problem. And I do like that spot for Colorado. Like they are better than what that 5-1 game was.
Yes.
We tend to give the best teams love, but for good reason. Some of these teams are really starting to separate themselves from the pack. And at this time of season, when that happens, they tend to roll. Take a look at Colorado before that game, right? Like this is going to happen. So pick your spots. Let's get legit. Steele's lock of the night was
Colorado on the puck line against the Detroit Red Wings.
Bang. And hammer Cale Makar for my lock of the night. And you can book that in, baby.
Pencil it in, lock it in, put your money down on the Colorado Avalanche Wednesday night. Flip and I are going huge with them for Wednesday's slate of games. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. If you want more gambling advice on what you should pick, but for not just hockey, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all podcast platforms, just like this podcast right here. So please make sure you go subscribe and follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform. Flip and I appreciate all the support you give us out there. So thank you so much for all the support. If you do subscribe, you will get the latest episode of Locked On Bets as soon as it's available each and every day, Monday to Friday, which is usually released at 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Thank you again for tuning in for today's podcast with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets. Make sure you hammer the Colorado Avalanche hard for Wednesday, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.